Hello, my name is Alex, and I'm here to talk about sex-selective abortion, also known as the epidemic of missing women. As we consider a wide and diverse range of gender equality issues, we must consider one of the most prevalent that occurs before girls are even born. This gendercide is heavily weighted against females and makes distorted sex ratios around the world. Young girls and women will face a lifetime of discrimination, but before they face that, they must overcome the most difficult obstacle, which is making it to being alive. The elimination of gender bias must be tackled from its earliest source, or else we will face a variety of consequences being seen in nations around the world. Particularly problematic in countries such as India, Korea, and China, there are predicted 126 million women who are missing due to sex-selective abortion and other gender discriminatory practices, according to the United Nations Population Fund. These countries are well known for common prejudices they hold that affect women throughout their lifetime, but even harder to tackle is the equality in the gender at birth ratio. Many more boys are born than girls. Because of ultrasound technology, parents are allowed to find out the sex of their baby and choose abortion if the baby is a female. If they do not choose abortion or cannot secure one, they often commit infanticide, are neglectful, or abandon baby girls on the side of the road. This issue has been rampaging for decades, but with the widespread, cost-effective, and accessible invention of ultrasound technology, the common practice of disclosing the sex of the fetus has allowed for parents that hold a pre-existing gender bias or who live in a nation with societal pressure to have a male child to abort fetuses that are disclosed as females and try again in hopes of having a son. With the rising severity of this issue, researchers and countries themselves are beginning to see and suffer the consequences of this serious discriminatory practice. Often headlined as China's excess males or India's male towns, these two countries are by far the most well-known and highly impacted by the sex ratio at birth. The main causes typically pointed to are the income and social status gap, China's one-child policy, and India's dowry system. There are towns in India where the distorted ratio is so bad there are now 16 men for every woman in the village. In China, there are thought to be 32 million more men than women, leaving many men unwed, without families, and more prone to crime and violence. The issue also creates a large influx of sexual harassment and violence, as well as a profitable market for human trafficking, which is known to be a serious issue in both countries. Clearly, this has a destructive impact on women, especially with boosting the market for rape and human trafficking. There are theories that the smaller population of women makes more women valuable in and of themselves, but research has yet to prove this. This has mainly impacted low-income families as they need sons for financial support, and people of Asian descent. Socioeconomic class has a large impact on the prevalence of sex-selective abortion. Higher economic and social status reduces the frequency, and although there are some European countries who have been implicated in the practice, it still remains most severe in the nations previously discussed. The media coverage on this topic is distressing, as many people see it as an issue that is unfixable without a total abortion ban. As some pro-life groups have picked up this topic as a spearhead to drive stricter abortion restrictions, much of the data regarding the USA and the UK have been blown out of proportion and biased towards anti-abortion and anti-immigration. This makes many of the sources unreliable and the data unusable for an objective understanding of how prevalent this practice is within Western nations. This is important for us as a community at ECSU to monitor because, especially when being dragged into the pro-life movement, this can have dangerous implications for all the women attending and working at our college. Not only can this general gender bias and stigma around women have a damaging impact on the self-esteem and our prospects for the future, but it can and is impeding on many women's rights around the world. I agree that this is a very important issue to tackle, but the way in which it is currently being handled is more destructive than helpful. They are drastically closing the window of time in which to secure an abortion, and it disproportionately affects the women of color and low-income women. If this trend is allowed to continue, they may continue to fight for a full abortion ban under the premise that they are fighting for gender equality. It is shown that these bans do not change the sex ratio at birth even after 5 years of being put in place. Their only purpose is to limit women's rights. This can impact the future bodily autonomy of every woman at ECSU, so it is important that we stay vigilant and aware in this fight, both against sex-selective abortions and the false attempts to fight it. Although these bans are a wrong step in starting to repair this issue in the gender gap, there are correct ways to do it that each of us can be stepping towards every day. This problem cannot be resolved through a fix-a-symptom approach because it will only present itself in other ways through neglect, infanticide, and abandonment. It must be tackled through social, cultural, and economic roots. The ways I propose we do so is by lobbying the outlawing and punishment of the dowry system. It is a large motivator to avoid female children since they won't be a future financial burden. I would also suggest supporting nonprofits that educate young girls in India, China, and Korea, as educating them and encouraging them to pursue careers makes them a desirable asset to their families, just as a son would be. Finally, I would suggest proposing a safety net system for families without sons to reduce the fear that when a daughter joins her husband's family, they will be left without caretaking and an income as a son would provide. This will increase the motivation to have a daughter, hopefully to equal as a son. Of course, there are many other routes and approaches to this issue, but these are primary causes that as a community we can tackle day by day and hopefully save millions of the world's future missing women. Thank you for listening to my presentation.